done my research on you, so I'm just basically curious as to where your interest in nature, materiality, and systems of design, where they stem from. Because with your background from Zaha Hadid Architects, it's kind of easy to assume that your interests grew in parametric design there. But I understand that your father was a computer scientist.
Good research.
Yeah, so where did your interest and inspirations come from?
I mean, you're right. I think my family is very much my inspiration. My parents, like my dad brought computers very, very soon. He was a math teacher at first, and then he learned computer science. And so we would experiment with the computers, and my mom brought me to the museums every week, and she was into the ecology. She worked for the Minister of the Environment, and they both wrote books together about how to marry economy and ecology. So they were quite pioneers, I would say. They went to the Rio Summit in '92.
Yeah.
I remember they asked me to do waitressing, and there was Raoni, the Amazonian tribe leader, who was here with Sting, the police singer.
No way.
Yeah. And so I grew up in kind of a sort of new consciousness of the environment, and of course it had a lasting impact on me because it was a moment in their life where they thought this was a crucial issue.
Right. And so from that early age, you had the kind of the environmental motivation, but then you also had this kind of scientific thing as well going into it. So
yeah,
you can see where those two things integrate from. And you had a rip wrap, didn't you, machine?
Rip wrap. That's much later. Yeah. So right now I was talking about me being like, really 10 years old or whatever, But later on, when obviously I went to the AA, I worked for many different architects, and then I decided to set up my practice. But yeah, the first thing I did was to kind of buy a RepRap printer. I got really excited. In fact, I didn't want to start my practice. I wanted to do a Fab Lab. I called it the People's Atelier. I thought that parametric design and digital fabrication worked hand in hand and would allow people to become like active conscious consumers, prosumers it's called, where they would be able to print and customize their products and instead of being so passive when you buy, you could actually understand what you're buying and customize it.
Wow.
That's why I got the RepRap. I was plus I was reading all these books on entrepreneurship and Richard Branson, and so I was very much willing to do a company in that spirit rather than a practice, an architectural practice. So that was the first company. It became FabPub later on, FabPub Limited.
How old were you when you were getting these ideas?
So I was about 28, maybe. That's the same year I started teaching at Westminster.
Oh, okay.
I think something my dad told me is like, it's important you start. If you want to start a company, then start it before you have kids, before you have all these commitments, mortgages and all, because then it's much harder, and the kind of level of commitments you need to start a company is beyond, it can tear a relationship apart. And it's very important to start soon if you have that ambition. I'm not saying this is the goal for everyone. I think that's somewhere I see that people can get misled in thinking that this is the lifestyle that everyone should have. I think it takes a certain level of passion and sacrifice. So
when you say start a company, do you mean establish the brand awareness, or do you mean actually have it functioning, carrying out its service?
I mean, there's many aspects to starting a company. I literally mean going on the company's house, registering a company, a limited company, and then, and then kind of starting, what will eventually become a registered company and functioning, of course. I mean, obviously, because you have to pay taxes, and also it's got to be functioning.
That makes sense, because now you're making me rethink some stuff. But I actually want to talk to you about your time at Zaha Hadid Architects, because you worked alongside some incredible people like Alvin Huang and Mark Fawns. Did you ever get a chance to sit down with Zaha or Patrick Schumacher, share a coffee or chat about the future?
Well, he interviewed me. So
Oh, wow.
I remember, so I was in third year at the AA, and obviously I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. So the teachers enjoyed it. Yusuke Obuchi, Alan Dempsey, my teachers, and Eugene Ann. They were amazing, amazing, really. And they said, well, Patrick has asked us if we knew anyone, and so we want to recommend you. And that was for the summer. And so I end up in this crazy place. I mean, at the time, it's like before the Pritzker Prize. And like you say, people like Mark Fornes were there. And everyone's just buzzing. And so I arrive in this place where everyone is just buzzing. And then Patrick's like, oh, yeah, sit down. And then he looks at my portfolio and I go through it, and obviously you spent a year on it, so you want to describe it properly, but he's in a hurry, right? Like, and then he's like, okay, done. Okay, you're starting now. They go on this team and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. So
Straight after interview.
Straight. And so I had no time to ask for, obviously, is it paid? I assumed it wasn't then. I was like, okay. And then I had just no time to adapt. I had holidays planned, and I'm like, well, but F it, like, let's just do it. I mean, it's so important when you're a young kind of aspiring architect to get these life lessons, like to be in practice, to be where innovation's happening, to be in those forefront. I mean, this practice at the time was the place to be, at least if you're interested in digital architecture. And so I was just so proud. I was so proud. I remember they gave me a Arthur at zahahadid.com. And I remember sending it to my friend. Hello! That's my email.
Bulk email.
Yeah, exactly. I was just so proud and so happy. And so I ended up just talking to everyone there. And like, there's obviously a coffee machine. And I was like, so where are you from? What brought you here? And people were just so proud of what they were doing. I remember Mark and Alvin worked together on a MediaTek in Po, and they did this carbon fiber roof, and they brought this 3D printed model. It was a carbon fiber roof, and they were like, Mark was like, that's going to be the first carbon fiber roof ever built. And so there was a real sense of excitement that was palpable in the practice.
That's crazy. What was it like working there on a day-to-day basis? Like, what time would you get in? Like, what's like the regular day as an architect? Were you an architect
No, not at all. I was in third year. I was part one, architectural assistant. And things were a little bit kind of messy. You could see that it had grown a little bit too fast for it to be digested. Right. And so there were different rooms. There was I forgot the names, like the green room and then so we would be downstairs. There would be other offices upstairs where Zaha would be. And so it was I don't know. People came a little bit late because they left really late, and sometimes you couldn't find a chair, and you're like, "Where is my, where is my, where's my desk?" And they're like, "Just sit here." Or it's like it was just. I think maybe they were surprised by their own success. I don't know, but it was definitely a very kind of weird practice. You just wonder. And also it was so decentralized in a way, because you had those guys who graduated from DRL, the masters, and they worked as team in DRL, and then the teams just continued at Zaha. So they already knew how to work together, and you had couples, and so people were just in decentralized team. And I say decentralized because there's no way Zaha would have seen everyone. And Patrick was around sitting behind the people and stuff, but Zaha was about a vision, a spirit, right? And so in a way, it didn't matter if she was around all the time. And so that's something I've learned there as well.
Okay, that's interesting. And I guess, like you're describing, this is like you're in the practice to be at. I would argue in a really pivotal time when it comes to digital fabrication software as well. At what point did you decide you wanted to kind of start your own practice? And did you take a lot of inspiration from your time working there? Because, like I said, I imagine a lot of people would be very satisfied with staying at Zaha Hadid Architects, rising up through the ranks. Although a lot of people, I have to say, have ended up starting really successful, notable practices after working there. But what was the sort of journey you went on? Because I feel like, from what you said, you probably always had that vision that you wanted to start. I know you didn't say practice, but you wanted to start something.
I don't know if you're that clear when you're young, life takes you in really interesting places, and I think it's good to just have that open mindset. So I wasn't like, oh, I want this or I want that. Mm-hmm. I was fascinated about some ideas and some specific things about digital design. I thought it was an empowering thing for people. I became very much into the entrepreneurial spirit a bit later. Okay. I think when I was in part 2 and after part 2, when I also realized that a lot of the projects I did after the experience at Zaha could be done in real life. And I think that's one thing with Yeye that I really appreciated, is their connection, or at least they were pushing towards the real life connection. So I'll tell you about my 4th and 5th year project, but they were just projects that pushed me to realize that actually you could really do something real.
So you can apply what seems to be really kind of fictional.
Yeah. It was very real. I mean, Yeye is a very technical school.
Right.
At least when I was there. I don't know how it is because I haven't been. But when we were there, it was the age of, Ahim Menges and Neri Oxman. And these were students at the time, And yeah, I know, it's crazy to think, I remember I have an email from Ahim Menges, who was in charge of like the IT stuff. It's crazy. Anyway, so
you want to put that on a wall.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But so it was a very special place. Like, I remember seeing the 3D printed kind of project that came out of this unit. I think Diploma Unit 4, where Ahim Menges was teaching, and then we were just like, that came from a 3D printer. Like how? And then everything was these components that were so clever and could almost like a human skin, or there was something extremely natural about it. But they were real because people could fabricate them, because we have a fab lab downstairs, and things were just. Things could materialize themselves. I think it used to be that architecture was very much, it's so big that anyways, we have to wait for the client, we need planning application. I think the idea of pavilions, the idea of kind of small scale experiential architecture really made me think that it's possible. It's possible to work at a scale that is very different from what conventional architecture does. And so that's when I started having ideas.
So when you kind of start realizing the pragmatics of it, you start thinking, actually, I can do something here. And would you argue that's kind of naturally what led you into starting your own practice?
I think there is a moment where you're being taught very forward-thinking ideas and technology, and the industry just doesn't match what you're being taught.
Right.
And so there's a sort of natural flow in which you're like, well, I have to invent a new kind of practice. And I think that's the beauty of learning things at Yeye, and things we're trying to teach people at Westminster now, which is, let's think a little bit ahead, and the industry will catch up with you instead of you catching up with the industry. And I think it's almost like a natural thought. You're like, all right, so I want to do this. And then you look around for practices and you're like, wait a sec, there's none. So we got to start it, So it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm so ambitious, I want my practice. It wasn't that. It was like, this is what I love.
Yeah.
I suggested it to my boss at the time. I worked at Procter Matthews. I remember saying, oh, we should buy a machine and this and that. And they're like, they don't understand it. I mean, they're from different generations. And so I'm like, well, I got to start it. And so I started getting interested in sort of how to start a company. And I read book about the Silicon Valley, how they raise funds and everything. And then, obviously it helps that my whole family are entrepreneurs. But that's how it came to my brain. And it wasn't at all like, I know my practice now has my name, but at the time I wanted to do that FabPub, People's Atelier. The reason the practice emerged out of this is because I got freelance jobs, and the freelance jobs led to more freelance jobs, and they led into me employing people in my freelancing company, in a way, and that became the practice. But FabPub still continued, and FabPub for me is a more true company in a way, something that could be very, very decentralized, whereas I feel like architectural practice will always be around a person's vision.
Right. I found that really profound point, actually, and it's kind of a lesson for me as well, that it's not as much as your practice, like you had this vision from a very young age, like, oh, I know what kind of profession I want to do. and I guess there's a lot of this is in the nature of how technology was advancing rapidly as well. But it's more this kind of like there's a gap in the market in a way, and you were in the position to have an effect and maybe bringing it into reality. So that's quite useful for me to know. But let's get down into it now, into the actual technology of things, because I think that's where you kind of really have some really interesting insights. I want to talk about two of the coolest sounding words that I've come across that have a lot to do with you. That's one is silkworm and the other one is GCode.
Okay.
I've done my research, like I said. So, but before we get into the nitty gritty, how did you come up with that name, silkworm? What's the logic behind it?
I don't think I came up with it. I think it's Adam Holloway.
Okay.
Or Carl Kirstrup Johnson. Like, we were basically friends from the AA. Awesome. And I just went to a workshop in Barcelona to learn how to do C# components on Grasshopper. And he was in his shed. He had a shed at the back of his garage to not so that he wouldn't bother his wife, I suppose. And then he was assembling the rep wrap. I was assembling a rep wrap. I think we were just posting about our discoveries. And then he reached out. He came to my living room, which is what my office was, and we had a talk about. He had this vision. I mean, he said, "Oh, we could send GCode directly from Grasshopper," and then I don't know. I actually don't remember. That's a good point. But all I know is that we started sitting down together and coming up with that plugin, which is quite a while ago, but. It was a brilliant way to get into the dialogue between design and machines, really.
That's really interesting, because actually when you think of silkworm, and you were talking about, is it differential growth? Is it called differential growth?
That's a bit different. Differential growth is when you, like in nature, if the edge grows a little bit faster than the inside and gets bigger in surface area, it has no choice but to curl.
Right. So I was looking at some of those outcomes, and they almost look like a silkworm was producing that. So I was like, maybe there's some link there.
Well, I mean, there is obviously the animal names. Like Grasshopper is like an ecosystem of plugins, and I think that's opened up a lot of possibilities. So as an homage to that community, you always choose an animal name.
I like the link,
but this one was because the printing kind of looks like a spider putting the silk, and or the silk or the worm putting the silk. So it was, it's a machine that outputs a sort of filament, and so I mean, obviously that for us the name probably came quite naturally.
I think it's a good name. That's what I'm trying to say.
But it's not a trademark or anything. It's
really?
like, no, I mean, it's not even a commercial thing.
It's open source as well.
I mean, the thing is, it's a bit like what I told you was the practice. The more you try to protect, the more you're like the less you do, the more you're fearful, the more. I think one needs to be careful about thinking that the world will take things from you, because it doesn't matter. Like the reason I'm here today is because I love sharing and I love giving insights, and I feel we're all one big system. And you asked me about systems, and we're all connected. Like my sadness can affect someone else, my happiness can affect someone else. So in a way, it's not me against you or me against someone else. It's we're all in this together. So, and the beauty, and I'm sure we'll speak about Burning Man, but this idea of gifting economy where, we did that plugin. Obviously, I was pretty broke because I was starting my practice, and yet I focused on a free plugin. And strangely enough, I did this, and then this company, Wasp, brilliant company, another animal, although it stands for World's Advanced Saving Project. They used it, and so they invited me for like a workshop, and then they're like, "Oh, that's cool. Okay, and so they gave me a printer.
Big one, right?
They gave me the 3 meters high printer. And I was like, wait a second. So the more you give, the more people give to you. And that's so beautiful. And that's a principle that I find deeply challenging when you think of capitalism. You're like, oh gosh, you need to protect this and that. And but actually it's the opposite. It's like people are so unused to it, and they find it, well, that guy's generous and that's a nice gift, and I'll give a gift back. And it's no expectations, but it's a beautiful way of thinking because it releases you, I think.
definitely see that, man. That's again another profound point. I like maybe morning is when I'm going to do these interviews now, because usually 5 p.m. people are tired.
That's true.
You got that good flow today. But yeah, let's talk about these kind of codes now. So a typical 3D printer requires X, Y, Z, E value to process code into design or material output. Now, all of those values combined is what you call GCode, right? So GCode is essentially language we use to communicate with a 3D printer.
Not just 3D printers, CNC, robots, they all take GCode. GCode stands for General Code. Okay. It was invented at MIT. And it kind of allows you to send really simple information in the form of a very straightforward machine code. And it just goes X, Y, Z. And then you have things like E for extrusion. And that goes straight to the extrusion motor. Right. And tells him or it how much plastic to extrude, right? So it's pretty much how much rotation that is converted into millimeters, and you're sending the amount of millimeters that correspond to the area, the surface area of how much plastic you want to extrude per line.
Right. And then, so I understand you, Adam Holloway, you developed Silkworm to manipulate that code.
It's more to avoid all the middle software that come in the process of doing GCode. Like, so usually you model a 3D shape, like the mug, but then you slice it, right? Using a slicing software, whether it's Slicer or Cura or Simplified 3D, I don't know. And then this outputs the GCode. I don't know if we thought that deep, but what was exciting for us is that you don't need to do that. You can directly model a polyline in Grasshopper, like literally a movement, and some values that can change. I think that's what excited us. It was the idea of a parametric conversation with the machine. So not just a kind of parametric form, slice it. It's more like, let's think of the movement of the machine, the speeds, all the parameters, the temperature, the extrusion, and let's try to vary this with like graphs. And so you could kind of gradually increase the speed, or gradually increase, or I don't know, use a sine curve to extrude more or less, so that it's parametric 3D printing, you know, in the same way than parametric forms or things like this. I think that's what excited us a lot.
And is this the first time this is happening from your knowledge? Because 3D printing is not that new.
Yeah, I think so. 3D printing, the patent for stereolithography was in 83, the year of my birth, and that's why I remember. And it was someone called Chuck Cole, I think, from 3D System, the company. I think he still goes to work. I know a friend who works there, and he has coffee breaks with him. Anyway, so the patent got released, and RepRap started because Dr. Adrian Boyer from University of Bath wanted a machine that self-replicates. I don't think he even thought he'll do a 3D print, like a affordable 3D printer. Right. He just had this vision of a replicating machine. Yeah. And so he just kind of did this, and then it became the blueprint for, say, the MakerBot, because the MakerBot people were part of this community and asked Adrian Boyer if he was okay with setting up a company, and they gave him part of the ownership of the company. And it went on and became the first big desktop thing, and then they sold it, and blah, blah, blah. So the process, although started in 83, I think to have a desktop version of it took a long time, because most of the time, I remember as a student, the machines were very expensive. And so the idea of it becoming desktop really happened around, I don't know, 2004-ish, 5-ish.
The thing is, when I haven't had a chance to use the software yet. I really want to. Actually, I was really close to picking your studio as well. I was really torn between yours and Sean's as well.
You did Sean Griffith?
Yeah, no, I ended up choosing Richard Difford.
Ah, cool, okay.
Because it really tied in with my dissertation.
Nice.
But actually, it's quite interesting because in some ways, it's a whole new approach in Richard's studio to implementing data in design. So we're looking at similar things, if you like.
Oh, you're there now?
Yeah, I'm there now.
Brilliant, okay.
Yeah. So, but what I realized is through this kind of software that you guys have been working on, you end up with these sort of idiosyncrasies, these really peculiar kind of, you didn't expect a 3D shape to be able to do this, let alone, 3D printing. Yeah. And it's because you've got that real level of depth of control with all those parameters. And that to me sounds incredible. And we talked about the differential, the differential growth thing. We talked about even you were able to create this sort of was it Burahapol, the wooden wave, and that was through lattice hinge, right? So you were able to control the curvature of wood, which from 3D printing on a 2D flat surface.
Yeah.
Right. That's. I guess my question is how far do you think this can go? And I don't mean like next year. I mean like serious vision, because I think out of the people to ask, you're probably the best to speculate on this.
I think it's one of those paradoxes with technology. There's a few, but the more you can control what you're doing, as in the more access you have to all the parameters, the more you can let go. The more you can kind of be surprised, let yourself be surprised by the machine, because you know that whatever that surprise will be, you can then use it to design again. And I think it's that process of conversation with that thing that produces things, and looking at it and thinking, oh, that's cool. Although it's a complete mistake and it was not expected. I think that this discussion with technology is very interesting when you're a creative person. I mean,
will we be able to 3D print a real functioning, breathing cow? Let's say. For example.
I was waiting for that last word. Look, I think the 3D printing became a sort of obsession. I know, especially a couple of years ago, because it was so exciting, so Star Trek-y for people to just teletransport or something. But the technology lags behind so much. It's at the end of the day, you're extruding a paste of plastic on top of another piece of plastic, or you're solidifying resin and so on. But those materials have to be so specific, and what you're talking about is like molecular printing, and so that means accessing at such a tiny scale. Like, we're really not there. But I think what I find exciting, I can't really talk for the biologists, but what I find exciting is in architecture, instead of thinking 3D printing, maybe if we thought gigantic cable robots that could be connected to the city and constantly build and unbuild cities, I find this extremely exciting.
I should have brought that. I'll rewatch it. This is helping my own project.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why we developed the Polybot, the sort of cable robot that assembles and disassembles.
That's huge. It's giant.
Well, it's scaleless because basically it's made of cables and winches. So the winch can be attached anywhere, and then you transform your room into a machine. I think it's that kind of thinking that will probably scale up, because I can't just think of a giant printer squirting a material into a building. And I don't know why you do that. Like, you want multi-materials. So you want to assemble aggregates of different materials that are probably prefabricated in a more kind of precise factory. I don't think you'll do on-site 3D printing per se. I think you'll just pick up materials and place them and kind of merge the crane with the 3D printer, but more of a pick and place type of printer. Yeah.
So you don't see giant scale 3D printers pasting out, envelopes of buildings.
I mean, they might, and then they might go and pick another head and then do something else. Like, you can't just do everything with one material. Why would you as well? Like, I mean, nature, changes. Like, it changes slowly. The bark is a little bit more solid than the leaf. Why would you do everything with the bark? Like, you have to differentiate based on function. And so, it might be that, sure, it extrudes, but then suddenly it goes and pick up a piece that is needed for the assembly, and then maybe it starts cutting something, or maybe it goes and pick up the piping, or I don't know, but I think we need to be a bit more open-minded with our conception of 3D printing and think of robotic fabrication in general, because printing, the act of printing, will not answer all, so, and it shouldn't.
And the great thing is the GCode silkworm thing applies to not just 3D,
all technology. Yeah.
It's a good kind of segue into actually this idea of varying the material is something that you've actually done as well, which is sort of in bioplastics. And bioplastics are something you're obviously quite familiar with, but you did the project Conifera with our favorite fashion brand, COS, which we are rocking today here, and up and down there. Hopefully we'll get a sponsor from them soon. Which was an incredible pavilion project, I have to say. But it was, what I loved about it, it wasn't too vogue. If you know what I mean. I mean, it was a simple thing. It was almost as if we could have printed this thing at home if we had the tools to do it. Obviously, the process is something you spend many hours and days and weeks coming up with. But I like that it didn't feel like it detached us from this technology in a way, if that makes sense. But talk us through the sort of, I'm really interested in bioplastics at the moment. So talk us through sort of the life cycle of corn or starch-based bioplastics in designs, for example, in the pavilion, but sort of from the start to the end.
Yeah. I mean, what you just described about it being accessible or not scary is definitely, I would say, beyond the piece. It was the brief of COS. When they sent us the brief, it said, we are a democratic brand, we're accessible. And that obviously spoke to my, People's Atelier FAPUB's hat. And so I was extremely happy that a brand that is actually quite respected in the art world is all about democratic and accessible art, and I think the more we separate art from the day-to-day, and the more you create these elites, and the more hard it is for everyone to think they can be creative. And I think it's important we democratize art because it helps us as human beings. Like, it helps us express sensibilities. I think it's great for mental health. And so I think it's important to say, look, you can do it too. It's not so complicated. And that's part of why I'm a teacher, and I want to kind of make sure everyone knows that they can do the same. It's very important for me. Okay, bioplastic. Look, I wasn't interested in bioplastic when I started 3D printing. It's just PLA is a material that we use with 3D printers.
Right.
And they just happened to be there, and slowly you realize, oh, PLA. And I think it was used with 3D printers because it's very low melting temperatures, around 190 degrees or something, compared to ABS, which is the one the Legos are made of. Right. And then slowly you're like, it's made from starch. Maybe we could explore how to make it ourselves. And some of our students at Westminster, like Marilu Valente, she started making her own bioplastic. But then I realized actually it's not the same. So the one you do with starch, vinegar, and glycerin is not the same as the one that you get when you buy, pellets or filaments, which is actually most of the time fermented sugar. So it can come from beetroot. Corn is you can extract sugar from it. And actually, the person who invented PLA was actually part of a corn company, corn crops. And they thought, okay, we are doing fuel, ethanol, and so we could probably do a plastic from it. And so it was just one of the many inventions around the fermentation of sugars. So you ferment sugar, and then you kind of you spun the material until kind of very thin and long molecules assemble, polymers. Which is exactly how plastic is plastic. The idea of plasticity is because it's full of these very long chains, and meaning that it kind of resists, it's not brittle. And so that's how bioplastic, is generated, and then it's cut into little beads, which is actually lactic acid, the same as when you run and you feel a source, I don't know how you say it in English, but and so that's the same lactic acid that is generated into these pellets and that you use. What's beautiful about it is it's biomaterial, so it comes from these renewable resources. Anything, it could be anything with sugar or starch. So it goes from corn to beetroot to potatoes so that's why it's beautiful. It's just, again, a democratic material that anyone could make. Not only that, but so that's the origin of it, which is not fossil fuel. So even if I stop the story here, we're already helping a lot the carbon footprint, right? True. So even if you were to stop but it doesn't stop this. Number two, it's very compatible with 3D printers, meaning that you can distribute manufacturing So in the case of cost, we send the code to many fab labs around the area. And that means that we didn't have transportation. We didn't have customs. We didn't have all these problems. And then we just print locally. So that's great. It's holistic, exactly. And then the components, because you have to think in modular ways, can then be reused because you have a modular thinking. That's also something where you don't have to waste. Then finally, you can use something like Silkworm to generate very efficient G-code. So you minimize the waste in that sense as well, because you can print the bare minimum, because you can link Silkworm with Caramba or something and maximize tension, minimize compression. Okay, so that's another one. Okay. And then after that, the life cycle, because you asked me to go through the entire thing, so I'll finish. When you don't want the material anymore, you can discard it in a composting facility. Because it's sugar, the bacteria love it. So they just kind of eat it. I mean, you need certain conditions. You can't just drop it in the bin, or you need anaerobic or open air composting facilities, but you need a certain level of humidity, 100% humidity, 60 degrees, I think. And you need the right bacteria. And you need to control
That's all possible, though, quite easily.
It's all possible. I mean, you may need to check the pH levels of your ground. You might need to add basic or acid kind of complements to make sure that your ground is neutral. And then you get this compost, which is rich compost because it's mixed with food waste and so on. And then they sell it to the farmers. So it goes back to and then you grow again. So when we say cradle to cradle or holistic or circular, it's really meant. It's like you use what you do and it goes back to the earth, and so you don't have all these microplastics and you don't end up in the ocean but you have to understand this whole cycle, and you have to be respectful. You have to have a deal with a composting facility if you're a business that comes and picks up your PLA. You have to be rigorous. Don't mix the normal plastic with your PLA plastic, because it's going to end up being bad for the recycling process, because recycling is extremely important, right? Before composting, you kind of want to recycle first. But there's so many cycles that recycling can go through. There's about 5 cycles for normal plastic before you just can't use it, because the molecules, they get shorter and shorter.
Right.
So it would be a lie to say recycling is fully the answer, because you can't recycle past 5 times. It would be a lie to say you should compost first, because you'd be wasting precious material that was extracted from the earth. So I think one needs to be curious about all these things now. I mean, we have no choice, right? And so that's how my curiosity started, because I don't want to talk bullshit, right? I want to tell you what I've learned and what,
That's amazing, man. The way you're describing these bioplastic making methods, I almost see like in the future, in the near future, people will have in their homes like a coffee machine and then a bioplastic making machine.
You should tell your brother.
Yeah. I'll get him in front now. But they start making their own bioplastics. That could be a thing one day.
And compost it themselves and grow their stuff and have a 3D printer to apply the food as well. I mean, we worked on 3D printing food. Exactly. Homes will become little factories, will become little farms. And the less transportation, the better. So the more you can grow at home, the better. I think holistic thinking, you said that word, is very important, I think, to really understand climate change and sustainability. 100%. It's not like one answer does all,
Yeah. Talking about climate change and sustainability, the construction industry is actually responsible for most of human sort of carbon emissions on our planet.
Yeah, 40%.
Wow, 40%. So that's thanks to steel factories and concrete. And in fact, actually...
More concrete than steel.
Right. So I actually heard in one of the interviews in Dezeen recently, you mentioned that concrete is the second most used substance in the world.
Cement, yeah.
After water.
After water,
like,
cement.
What?
Yeah. That's one of my ex-students, Andre Jipa, who told me that stat.
Wow.
And because no one has I saw Elon Musk saying that 80% of stats are wrong.
Yeah.
But so it's important to discuss it.
Ma.
Yeah. Crazy, yeah.
That's
Yeah. That's really funny. Anyways, so stats, we need to talk about it. That's why I love this kind of stuff, because, what I say might be wrong, and I want people to challenge it. I want to trigger that curiosity, and that's why I do this Dezeen Day and all that. because I think that the first thing is people are upset and they go to the street and they're like, oh, Greta Thunberg and all that. We're upset, right? Sure. Okay. We're all upset. I'm upset. We're all upset. I mean, maybe we need more people to be upset, but that activism, I think, has no value unless it's transformed into positive change. And positive change comes from understanding the data. It comes from innovation. It comes from holistic thinking. And it comes from personal initiative, and so I think it's extremely important to understand these statistics and those metrics, and the standards, LEEDs, BREEAM, the British standards, which are evolving with bioplastic now. So we need to be serious about it, not just angry. 100%. So sure, we're gonna go and do the climate strikes and the extinction rebellion and all that, but what I'm trying to tell people is also look into what you can do. And understand the impact of what you can do, because it's not so simple, and even the specialists might not know all the answers that you need to know.
100%. You're talking about, we're talking about this holistic system, and I'm realizing now that actually, and I'm obviously, I think awareness around sustainability is growing a lot right now as well. What we're finding is people are realizing, experts are finally got it into our heads that it starts with you. It starts with you washing out your tub of plastic, make sure it's clean, putting it in the right bin, and only then will things start to improve, not just go out and start being internet warriors. You've got to take action. But then the other thing is, I love what you say, is about allowing there to be a place of debate when it comes to facts, when it comes to the science as well, because people are presenting, viable cases. And I've actually seen, I don't think many people are aware, I've actually seen a lot of contradictory reports
for sure
to what all the outrages on this environmental crisis we're in, but that'll be a whole podcast episode in itself, I think. But the point is, we can implement change, and there are improvements 100%, especially in our industry. It actually shocked me when I saw the whole construction thing of the concrete. For some reason I imagined a glass of water in my hand and a glass of concrete. But I guess what it made me realize is, as architects, the tools and the roles they have, specifically the tools, the roles, they're evolving, and they need to evolve. And I guess that's the saving grace of our profession, if we're going to instill some hope into the people, is, we can evolve and innovate quite easily in this profession. There's a lot of room to innovate and evolve. It seems more and more obvious that a lot, if not all, of the problems around sustainability in architecture are related to materials, materiality. Now, one concept I wanted to talk about is you touched upon it as well, is methods to reuse material as a way to kind of be more sustainable, be less wasteful. Now, we all know about recycling, but what can you tell us about upcycling? Because I don't know if many people know what that is.
So upcycling is, recycling, I would say, is probably take a material, crush it, and then redo something with the material that is different, right? Upcycling is taking a mug and then doing a structure with the mug. You don't go through the act of bringing it back to raw material, I would imagine. And so I guess that's how I would see it, upcycling. You do another kind of thing with a discarded thing, right? So there was a website like this, upcycling, Free Cycle, I think, where people they didn't want their couch anymore, and so instead of throwing it, they put it on Free Cycle, and then someone who wants a couch gets it for free. But he has to go through the pain of coming, picking it up, organizing transportation, and so on. So I mean, it's beautiful to think that this even exists, an economy of just here it's yours if you want. Like, I just don't want to waste it, Of
course.
There
was there's an aspect of it I was looking into, is it's like almost as if you've got your plastic bottle, you recycle it, it will maybe get crushed into pellets and then be used to make a new bottle. But the concept of upcycling is like you throw away your garbage, which has almost no value, and it's almost more, I don't want to say compostable, but I guess, less valued material.
Yeah.
Because plastic is quite seen as valued, but almost making something out of nothing. So like one idea I actually had in university in my sort of early years is like amount of clothes that students throw away, and they just put it in bin bags and chuck it in the bin. And I know we got clothes banks, but even those clothes banks are like overflowing.
Yeah.
But like, what if we, shredded all those clothes down to some sort of raw material?
Yeah.
There's room in this profession to innovate in that area, and I think upcycling is going to be really interesting in the future.
I mean, you said something. Innovation, right, and like creativity is so important right now. It's almost like we got excited with the internet boom, and we did all these internet websites, and there was this kind of buzz and so on. Let's use that climate urgency to activate that sort of excitement of innovation. Like a lot of people, in the kind of climate strikes and all that, they say we need to change capitalism. It's not going to work. And I disagree. I think capitalism allows for innovations. You just have to direct it the right way. It's like a kind of flow. It's like a bloodstream. You just have to make sure the veins are, oriented towards the right heart. And so it's really important that us, architecture students and so on, think creatively. Like, what can I do with wastes? Can I put waste in my 3D printer somehow? Can I come up with a machine or can I do a structure made of water bottles? Like I came from Bolivia and Peru, and I saw they made these boats out of plastic bottles. Like they obviously they are much poorer than here in London, but I think they had that culture of always never wasting. Like everything is valuable around you. So I remember seeing a door hinge that was a sole, like from a shoe.
Wow.
And I thought, wow. And they celebrated that. They're like, look, I made a hinge from a sole I found on the ground. And there's this pride of look, this is clever. And I was like, yeah, that's clever. Yeah, and it's great that they didn't even try to hide the fact that it's a sole.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I just we always want things to be finished and clean, and architects are obsessed with details, and they're just like this sort of strange obsession with perfection, and that hinders us. I think we should really actually accept imperfection and have roughness around us, because then we'll accept the fact that humans need to be more creative. And I think the more polished and finished something, again, the less people think it's accessible. The less people think they can do it themselves. And I think that's one of the bad things about capitalism. It creates a dependence to buying. Consumerism. But that's different. I mean, capitalism and consumerism are different concepts.
True. In fact, I think it's a good point to mention as well, as you're suggesting, that actually capitalism, democracy, they're not just these kind of monotonous systems that if you do it, that's it. There are multiple ways of doing capitalism. There's multiple ways, there are different types of democracies, and we're seeing all around the world, which democracies aren't really
You're right.
doing what.
The world is not monolithic. Like things have gradients and variations, and parametric design is a great way to understand that.
True.
There's so many different ways we can
optimize systems.
Well, I don't know. I mean, optimize, I think vary, like natural evolution. Like things vary. You have variations of systems. You're right. And we can kind of push, to me, capitalism is just a word we apply to a system that's sort of naturally happening. We try different things, and it always comes back to this markets, and it's normal because it's the most decentralized form of operation between humans.
True.
You'd produce something, we exchange, we do stuff. But what happened is regulation is global consciousness of problems, and that's where we should. I don't think we should expect the change of our system so abruptly that we need to stop capitalism altogether, and because we always say that, and then it ends up in like sort of really bad things. And like not only that, but it's quasi impossible to do it. And when it happens, we saw what happened. Let's not try to cut the head of the king as we did in France. Like actually let's be our own kings, and let's create our own kingdoms. I mean, that's a lesson from being French in the UK, I guess.
Talking about it kind of makes me think about individual merit, and I think that raises a really interesting question in the field of architecture, especially to do with the way robotics and technology and parametrics are going. Because what continues to strike me about you is the willingness and I guess the initiative to push the boundaries of technology and integrate sort of the infinite possibilities of code, script, or data in design. It's sort of, these movements are synonymous with Zuckerberg and with Facebook and Schwartz with Reddit, what they wanted to do with code and how it could change a whole industry. My question is, what do you say to those who say that the more we try to assimilate technology into the design process, the higher the risk of losing designer merit, or the human parameter, if you like? In some ways, the fear, I guess, is if we become too technocratic, there's a real possibility of automation in design. Now, I guess we can all speculate where that will lead, but which we can kind of say it would kind of diminish the value of the need for architects, almost make the profession obsolete. What do you say to that?
I mean, it's a very valid question, and it's something that people are very fearful of. I think it's okay to let go of architects as we know them. It's okay to think of a new kind of architecture or a new kind of job called, architect. Let go of architect. Welcome architects. Professions have always evolved, right? Like architect has survived as a word and as a profession, and it will survive, I think, because it's one of those creative industries where you need the kind of creativity and personal artistic expression that robots will never be able to do, simply because they don't have a dad, a mom that taught them the beauty of looking at a sunrise or touching a soft they will never feel what we feel, because we have sensors that are connected in a certain way to our brains and our emotions. They do not have that, and so they can't relate to another human being at that level. So that will never be, I think, to my kind of humble opinion, a problem of being replaced by robots. Yeah, to me, robots will always be the tools that have, of course, an intelligence, their own intelligence, an intelligence that is extremely powerful, much faster at computing things than us. Obviously they'll become extremely intelligent, and they already are a different kind of intelligence, but a kind of intelligence that will help us accelerate processes and imitate nature even more. So in my mind, what's going to be very beautiful is that we're going to have these tools that can compute billions of years of evolution in a second. And so what I mean by that is you'll be kind of reproducing what natural evolution has done so well, which is to create that sort of biodiversity that is complementary, and that kind of offers a high efficiency. I mean, natural things, that's why our students study them, are extremely efficient, and they're so beautiful because they're so efficient and because they are so symbiotic with their ecosystem. When you walk in a forest and you look around and you're like, wow, it's so much richer than you see that room, for example, where only humans that have a limited calculation process in their brain. They might have good intention. In fact, maybe the form of the building might be part of this, remembering the sunset with your dad and so on. But on a kind of very local efficiency, way, our buildings are nowhere near as efficient as nature. And when I say nature, I mean, I don't know, a flower, a cactus.
Arguably, they are the top standard of efficiency and
100%. And that's because they had billions
There's
of
nothing
years.
more efficient than...
Yeah, and we are too. We are nature, but we think that what we produce somehow should be our, I don't know. Well, actually, I don't think we think. I just think we don't have the capability to reproduce the same efficiency that nature has. And I think that artificial intelligence and where computing is going will bring us closer to nature. It's another kind of paradox.
Yeah, that is true, because all these years and years and years of technology advancing, we're going through massive paradigm shifts, and now we've reached today the precipice of technology today, and we're back at nature.
Yeah.
It's like, again, a cyclical system,
Yeah.
It's it makes me see the profoundity of why you're interested in it. When it comes to these kind of parametric softwares and things like that, I have a bit of a confession to make, and it's a bit of an anxiety I have, and I'm sure many students will be wondering this too. I'm no expert in Grasshopper or parametric design, as I say, and sometimes when I see the level of competence some people have, even students with it, it almost makes me feel like a sense of anxiety. But will those who don't become proficient in digital fabrication software get left behind? Because I mean, does Mamou-Mani Limited only employ Grasshopper parametric experts?
Well, we provide classes. I mean, yes is the answer. You will be left behind, and I think it's very important that you get on the train. Like, I'll just be honest. Like, I just think that if you don't know how to code, if you don't know how to use, you could be left behind. It's fine. Like, I mean, some people might be okay with that, and they're just like we say, nothing is monolithic. There might still be another world of architects that still, are resisting the digital revolution, and
well, it could be another form of digital innovation.
There could be lots of different. So I'm not here to preach one way or the other, but the kind of revolution I'm speaking about requires people to know
this language,
the tools.
Yeah.
And I don't mean just Grasshopper. I just mean mathematics. I mean being open to, I would say, objective science that is kind of the result of all our human intelligence, let's say, from vector geometry to C# or Python, like that sort of curiosity to understand how machines work. Because I do think that if we don't want to be controlled by the tools, if we want to be able to design with the tools, we need to understand them. And it's very likely that other people will use that, as you say. So if we're a system, and if you want to be part of the architectural world that is at the forefront of what's going on, it's very important that you're not a victim of your tools, and that you can control your tools. And I think that's extremely important. But that's always been like this. Like, you want to build a cathedral, you need to be really good at cutting stone.
When AutoCAD came out, I'm sure there were some students like, do we have to learn this? And they're like, yeah.
No, look, it should be a passion. It should be a pleasure. Don't see it as a...
Well, what's the bare minimum? Because people are going to have this anxiety. Like, I know people who... I have some experience with Grasshopper. I can find my way around it. But like I said, I'm not expert. What's the bare minimum? You think?
No, of course. I mean, no one. Expertise is a strange word, because an expertise is built up by tiny little amounts of efforts that are accumulating into expertise. I was the worst. Like, there was this forum online, grasshopper3d.com, and I was starting, and I was like, how do you do this? And then people are like, you're not even like trying. And I was like, okay, next question. I've tried that. How do you do this? And then it's like, and then so I remember annoying everyone because I was the worst at asking questions, but I learned how to learn. And I think that's really important for people to know, that everyone wants to help you understand that tool, because people help me. So I want to help you, right? So I do classes because I'm grateful at the people that taught me.
No, it's open source, Silkworm.
Well, yeah, I mean, Silkworm is just one of those many plugins that are in Grasshopper. Grasshopper is an ecosystem of tools. And so again, it doesn't matter whether it's Grasshopper or another tool, but the beauty of Grasshopper is the community of people that want to help. I think that's what makes this tool especially friendly to young designers like yourself that are scared, because everyone is here helping and everyone wants to help you. There's no commercial interest, or it's just a genuinely nice software and team and people around it. There's no kind of shareholder wanting to make sure it's as profitable as possible. It's a, again, ethical capitalist company, right? Like McNeil, I think. And so I would say join classes. Again, we give classes. I give classes every Tuesday night, level 1, level 2.
Where?
In our space on Hackney Road.
Is it that We Want to Learn?
No, We Want to Learn is our blog with Toby on Toby Burgess for the S10.
Where can we find how to get involved in those classes?
simplyrhino.co.uk.
CMP?
Simply Rhino.
Oh, Simply.
Yeah. Just Simply Rhino. And those are the commercial classes we give. I've been doing this for 8 years. I mean, we have a big team, and the studio is literally below my architecture studio. So, for example.
Yeah.
Or if you're at Westminster, just join my classes. We do them on Monday or Thursday. They're open to everyone.
I can walk in.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing with universities is like people don't realize that. I mean, who's going to kick you out, right? If you come in a class and you're like, I really want to learn. Can I be here? And I'll just shadow this. Like, I can't think of a teacher who'll say, no, this is my class. Just get the hell out. Like, I think students also need to realize that a university is a beautiful place because it's many people wanting to learn at the same time, at the same place. So what you're doing is great. Like our conversation, I think is showing that sort of self-initiative. You said it yourself. You did that podcast. You found this place, but amazing. I didn't even know we had that campus here. I didn't know we had these facilities. And universities are always like this. There's always like amazing things happening if you have that sort of initiative and curiosity. Yeah. Come to my classes. Like ask the DS10 students when is the next class and show up. Like.
I want to be part-time in a few studios, I have a bad habit or a good habit of walking around studios and just spending 20 minutes.
I was the
listening.
same. I had that job at the AA when I was studying where I had to listen to all lectures and write a summary of the lectures.
Oh,
beautiful, right? Like,
no.
Really? I was like, how is that even a job? Like, I watch lecture anyways. Every lecture since the 70s and when they started recording lectures at the AA. Right. And so I watched like all kinds of stuff and then I write a summary of it. I mean, obviously some were more interesting than others, but it's like, here, learn and we'll pay you. And
oh, you got paid for it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, amazing. £7 an hour, I think. Yeah.
Brilliant. So you're increasing in knowledge and finance.
Amazing. Those jobs happen. They were. I mean, I'm still amazed this happened. But.
Actually, Elon Musk said something like, don't quote me on this, but that if industries and the younger generation that is now don't kind of integrate with coding, because coding is kind of assimilate with most professions anyway, they're gonna get left behind. So in a way, you kind of said you agree with that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Elon Musk is an engineer, right? So he doesn't come from a place like us. Yeah. We come from architecture. We come from what is known as a creative industry because it requires creativity through feelings and through connecting with other human beings, right? I mean, when you do PayPal, do you really need to connect on an intimate level, right? I don't know, but he comes from the computer scientist / engineer. And of course, he will be fearful because a lot of the automatization is happening on engineers' tasks, on tasks that are repetitive. They don't require a sort of subjectivity. So of course he will say, oh, you're all going to disappear and replace. But in that debate where Jack Ma got a bit ridiculed, which I thought was a bit unfair, Jack Ma was like, oh, but what about the heart? And he's right. Like, and I don't think Elon Musk could see that because he doesn't come from that world.
He's got a different language.
Of course. And he's amazing and an incredible thinker. But I think a very engineering based mind. Not necessarily the kind of empathetic, how can you say, a human-to-human kind of task that architects have to do because our job is a weird job.
Social-based. Yeah. That's so true. I'm sure many people have seen that interaction. It's really that, isn't it? It's like people were ridiculing Jack Ma a lot, but they all both have their own kind of nuanced language. Jack Ma is always, the Alibaba is all about, user experience, how people feel about products and how you improve their experience. And then, like you say, Elon Musk is just about engineering, the technology behind things. So they were not
beautiful. It's a
understanding
beautiful.
each other, I don't think.
It was a beautiful conversation of two worlds. Jack Ma is a teacher. He was an
Yeah.
He was an English teacher, right? So he has that empathetic connection with people, and you know, I read Elon Musk's biography. He's a real kind of incredible innovator when it comes to technical understanding of the world, and so I thought this was a really interesting conversation.
Oh, no doubt.
For that reason, the two worlds coming together, you know, and two cultures as well, you know, the Chinese culture and the American culture, and they're very, very different. Yeah,
true. Just to kind of come to an end now, I just wanted to quickly talk about the whole unpaid internship controversy that's recently come up. Now, I understand that Junya Ishigami was kind of in the center of all this, and he actually said during the showcase of his commission for the Serpentine that he's had one of the hardest years of his life this year.
Yeah.
And no doubt much of that has been due to the uproar around his practice in this regard. I was curious as to what your thoughts are on the outrage about unpaid internships.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's more that meets the eye. Obviously, the practice is obviously questionable, obviously not acceptable when you think about some of the things. But I think people often, you know, we were talking about this kind of outrage, being quick to kind of get angry and you know, start protests and things. But I personally feel like there's a lot to understand in how these kind of natural systems come about when it comes to internships. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I was personally like shocked at the sort of crazy public shaming and pointing fingers and this sort of people's jury kind of. You said you had Adam here on here in the podcast, and I had this conversation with him. I was just like, you know, why do you do this? Like, why would you shame someone online without knowing the details or the legal factor or the Japanese culture for this case? You know, like, why would you impose your truth to someone online in front of everyone? That's neither your role. You know, you're not a judge. You're not even one of the students who was exploited. You know, so I mean, I could understand if a student was really exploited and would kind of say, "Look, this is what happened to me," but he was like, I don't know, like some kind of Justice League kind of guy, like, yeah, let's publish everything from my students. Like, let your students do it. Like, if they had grudges, and also there's a legal system. If you're employed in an illegal way, say it, judge, the guy gets fined, or I don't know what the sort of criminal offense it would be, or but why think that we know better than the law or than the channels to kind of change the system? Again, it's a little bit like going in the street and sort of pointing fingers and thinking, change the system, like, oh, you government, you're so corrupt. The government is us. This is a democracy. We elect our leaders.
True.
Go through the route, like, become a politician. If that's really so dear to you that you take the streets, then represent us. You know, get elected. If your ideas are big enough, then get elected. Like, Adam, become president of the RIBA and change the rules. Like, I just didn't like this because I think it was very unfair on our colleagues, you know. And I think architecture is so hard, and
especially professions trying to, you know, establish, you know, it's very competitive.
It's competitive. It's harsh. We're often unpaid by the clients themselves.
Yeah.
Why would we, if anything, then like change or question the method of being commissioned? Establish legal rules. Like, the RBA is brilliant because it gives you this sort of frameworks on how to approach a client based on stages and so on. But of course, no one agrees with unpaid work. But saying this, I did an unpaid internship at Zaha, and like I told you, it's the most valuable experience I had, and I would have, you know, died to be part of this atmosphere of this learning place.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to.
I was a volunteer.
Yeah.
It's not. He talks about slavery. I mean, really, slavery? Like a slavery, like kind of slave boat kind of slavery. Serious? Like, I think, let's step back. Like, okay, I'm spending my summer I've saved money. I watched lectures online. I wrote summaries. I want to spend that money. I can go on holidays. No, I decided to spend it on my sandwich and my rent and go to Zaha. Like a volunteer. It's a volunteer work. Like, I want to do this. I'm not a slave whatsoever. I could walk out the door whenever I want. I'm not exploited. I'm learning so much. I'm going to Mark. I'm asking how he does this. I'm going to all these amazing people. I'm learning. I'm young. I need to learn. I'm at school. I'm not exploited. I mean, and they don't care about me. I don't have skills yet. Like, if anything, I'm so grateful they took me so I can learn these skills to become employable. If schools, at the same time, they don't want to form employable people and they don't want free internship, well, great. Like, when are we going to become employable? Like, when am I going to find someone who understands, I mean, all that this has done is like stop our desire to get people in just for the sake of teaching. I teach, so I have that satisfaction to teach people that are fairly employable. But I also accepted people to come by just as sort of shadow observers because I thought that maybe I could employ them later. And I wanted to give them a shot because they were really keen. And so I disagreed with this whole uproar, and I disagree in general with anger that is counterproductive. I'm sure they're good intentions, but I just don't think it's the right way to match their the change they want to see.
Sure. And the thing is, there are things that we have to learn from it, obviously. And I did have Angela Brady on, actually, which hasn't been put out yet. So I did ask her all these questions, and she said, look, RIBA has set the rules, but then I feel like there's also the nuances of practice. And like you said, by the way, when you were interning at Zaha, was that before or after your degree?
It was during.
During.
So after my part 1 and before my part 2.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, like, if somebody's going into a place because they know what they're signing up for, they're going in here because they know they want to get some incredible experience, having experience, sometimes experience is priceless. Like, you're going to be able to, like, even me, I'm not getting paid for this, but I get to have, I think people will be lucky to be able to sit down with you for an hour and a half, 2 hours. A lot of the guests I have, and even Adam, like, for me to be able to sit down with these people for that long, I love the fact I can do that, and I've got this excuse to do it.
Look, not everything is monetary. I think that's probably the big problem of that uproar, was that money is cash.
Yeah.
Or that value is money. Or I think another thing I've learned with Burning Man, or through Silkworm or open source or gifting economy, is that me too, I'm not paid to be here, of course. And I'm even spending money to be here. Why? Because I value these moments, and I value like being able to speak to everyone and to be, that has a value of its own. Like, one needs to differentiate financial value with just general value as human beings, and valuing contacts and knowledge, and and I think that's really important. And so what people were getting in those internships was way beyond money.
Yeah, like
you said, experience, being a foot in the door of a practice that has gone through that really painful research and so on.
I think, again, another point you mentioned is, and I completely agree, is if the individual, if the it's case by case, if the person has felt that they've been oppressed in some way, then I feel like we've got we've got the outlets for that to be expressed. And even the RIBA, they have a protocol. They say, report it to us. If you find anybody who is not doing their minimum wage, then you can report it to us. But there's also, like you say, a level of informality where I might call you up. Let's say I'm an 18-year-old eager person. I'm like, hey, Arthur, can I please come and have a look at the thing? And you're like, you know what? Come round. We'll show you the programs. In fact, you can get on these computers. We'll give you some of the projects we're doing. It'll help us in some ways, but it's mainly to help you.
I mean, to be honest, it's really both ways, because it's often even more tricky to get someone that is really inexperienced than it helps. So people say exploitation. Well, actually, the amount of time I had to sit down and kind of just teach. I mean, when you hire people that you pay, and you're kind of course, when I say pay or unpay, I don't mean zero money. Like, we always kind of, I want to put that caveat, right? We pay expenses. We would pay a couple £100. But when when you hire a part one professional, like a person that at the sort of rate that the kind of the industry requires, you also expect a level of skill that is matching that pay, and you want that person to be able to straight away generate the income to not only pay salary, but to also make a kind of the turnover, like
match it.
The margin, and just also pay the office and pay. So what are we saying? Like, I'll be fully transparent. Like, our offices, cost, around, I would say around £17,000 a month, right? To generate that, right? I need people to focus on producing enough income to pay not only that practice and then allow for the rainy days, right? The margin that you put on top of it. So let's say we have to generate £20,000 a month, right? To do that, I need like constant activities that generate that kind of income. And it's very stressful as a business owner, right? Like, you're not, there's no kind of secret tree in which if we don't meet this amount, we'll have to kind of fire people. So it will affect the entire team. So any decisions I'll take in terms of employment affects the entire team as well. It's a, I just think like understanding how practices work, understanding the sort of business aspect of a practice. If we want to train employable people, then we need to think of our courses maybe a little bit differently. If we don't, and we rely on apprenticeship, then we should allow for maybe a more flexible system for companies to train people, and kind of, and it probably exists, I'm sure, but maybe not enough. Maybe there should be a kind of new kind of contract that allows for in-office learning, that where we kind of, I talked to a friend of mine whose wife is an employment lawyer. Maybe there should be a set of learning outcome from your internship. Maybe we should set this at the interview level. Maybe we should structure these internships to really meet a certain criteria, so that you don't end up just wrapping boxes for models or moving someone's home. I've done that. So maybe we should just make sure that learning process is truly happening. Because I think what we would call exploitation is really just using an intern for free to do menial tasks that are absolutely not beneficial for them. But then again, of course, it's also up to you to go around and ask people and learn as well. Responsibility is very important, self-responsibility. So anyway, sorry, I went very long there.
This is exactly what the kind of insight I wanted. It's worth saying as well that we are not saying that, unpaid internships or unpaid apprenticeships is good or it's acceptable. What we're saying is that there's more kind of depth to these situations, and there's always a case by case. There's always a case by case scenario that you've got to investigate. Now, obviously, the principle is, and that's exactly why the RIB have established this rule set in stone, that you cannot underpay people. There's a minimum wage.
It's not just the RBA. You cannot employ below minimum wage for sure.
But the RIBA take extra efforts to protect the people who work in the profession.
And there is apprenticeship, and that's a recognized thing that is also below the minimum wage. Right. And so they are, but part 3 is great at teaching you all that. Like and that's what I mean. Like, the people that did that scandal probably didn't go through that course. Probably they don't know all these nuances. Probably don't have a team or a company, so they don't necessarily understand the intricacy and the nuance of all that. And it's too easy to do a global shaming as if you're the great man that is perfect. We're not. I'm not perfect. I give insights, and I try to give insights to the complications of, say, the life cycle of materials and so on. But I have a plastic bottle here, right? Like, I have a kind of one-use plastic bottle that I bought because I love this juice. Whether I'm going to put it in recycling device, it depends if I find one. Otherwise, I'm not going to just keep it forever. So what I mean is I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to give lessons. I think that's the difference, I think, between a tutor or someone who gives lessons to people, like, you know, this is the truth.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really love about, say, even here at Westminster or the English system, is you're more like tutors. You give insights, you show a way, and people can follow or not, but you're not here to blame or say this is bad, this is good. Like, I think it's
yeah. Cool, man. I think, again, that could be another episode in of itself. But I've learned a lot. I'm very grateful for the time you've given me. You know, I guess I'll finish quickly with a little quote you said, and kind of summarizes the beginning part of this podcast, where you said, if you're gonna design with them, you better know their language. And I guess talking about robots or machines in that sense. But that made a lot of sense to me, because one of the questions I had initially was, how can humans and machines design together? Because that whole question of autonomy and, like, you know, we're losing individual merit. But I think that's quite perfectly summarized in that sentence, that it comes back to the point you were making about tools. We've got to use these tools. Don't let the tools use you. I feel like students need to understand that, look, you have to make yourself valuable. And this covers even the whole internship thing we're talking about as well.
You're right.
Is you can't just expect that you're going to finish university and suddenly you're of immense value and you're going to be able to, you know, of course there are entitlements, your rights as a citizen, as a worker, as because you've done your degree, but there's also other things. You have to make sure you're valuable in, you know, with the way that technology is progressing. You have to make sure that you're valuable in that what you can actually offer a firm. And each firm might require something slightly different. You know, you might bring something to that firm that, you know, they've been looking for example. And then I think in this statement, you're talking about, when we think about machines, when we think about technology, let's not be scared. Let's try to embrace it, but also realize that when we embrace it, we're not going to lose our creativity. It's just a starting point for us to be more creative, I feel. So I didn't think I would be doing the monologue to finish off. But
no, I mean, I could, when you say to design better, we need to design with them or understand them. I mean, you could replace them with robots, sure, but you could also replace it with materials.
Sure.
And even with teams, you know, like, I think, you know, I wouldn't really dare kind of saying that I'm alone or that I designed by myself, or we're teams. You always work in teams. And if you want to help design better buildings, then you need to know the tools that your team is using as well. And, you know, I think it's very important that we understand each other through understanding what tools we use. And I think, you know, if you learn Grasshopper, it's also to understand a new kind of design methodology. And that design methodology is very hard to understand unless you're practicing. So it's a tool, but it also redefines a method. And it's that method is extremely important to have this holistic thinking that we talked about. So yeah, try to understand the world. And there is a certain passivity, I think, in general, which is a bit natural to human beings. I'd say break that. Be curious, have initiatives, try to see how the world wants you to have initiative, try to see how you can start things you want to start. Just give it a chance. Don't blame, do, right? Like, I think to me that's a very valuable lesson that I learned.
So you've just kind of started talking about what you would you advise today's generation of students?
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I would advise of architecture students. Yes. I would say very often when you're young or younger, I hope I'm not that old, you have preconceptions and you judge fast. I think you judge a bit faster than when you grow a bit older, because not that you've seen it all, but you understand the world is a bit more complex. And don't let your youthful desire and passion to blind you. Don't let them blind you about the complexity of things. Try to be passionate about complexity. Try to have the kind of curiosity about the world, a sort of unaltered curiosity that is not a judgmental curiosity, that is not a preconceived curiosity. Let the world be. Like, let the stuff around you be, and try to understand them before you make any sort of judgment of what could be better or worse. I observe this with my team, and because I have a very young team, and there's a lot of kind of barriers between what's good or bad, between what things should be or what they shouldn't be, what design is, or things like this. And there's this, and I had this when I was younger, which is I give up because I know, you know, I went through multiple depression because I thought I knew the truth and I was disappointed. And actually, I wish I could go back and tell myself, Arthur, that's not the truth. Like, the truth is way more layered than what you think. And let that layering of the truth be your mattress to innovate, right? Let it be your comfortable zone where you shouldn't be anxious, because the truth is so layered that it's actually soft, and not the harsh truth that you thought the world was, and the one that made you so sad when you were young.
What a way to end. Thank you so much, Alan.
No